We think that we have met your goodness by the will of providence, just so that we may accept you as the captain of the ship for those who desire to cross the difficult ocean of Kali, which deteriorates all the good qualities of a human being. Purport. The age of Kali is very dangerous for the human being. Human life is simply meant for self-realization. But due to this dangerous age, men have completely forgotten the aim of life. In this age, the lifespan will gradually decrease. People will gradually lose their memory, finer sentiments, strength, and better qualities. A list of the anomalies for this age is given in the 12th canto of this work. And so this age is very difficult for those who want to utilize this life for self-realization. The people are so busy with sense gratification that they completely forget about self-realization. Out of madness, they frankly say that there is no need for self-realization because they do not realize that this brief life is but a moment on our great journey towards self-realization. The whole system of education is geared to sense gratification, and if a learned man thinks it over, he sees that the children of this age are being intentionally sent to the slaughterhouse of so-called education. Learned men, therefore, must be cautious of this age. If they at all want to cross over the dangerous ocean of Kali, they must follow the footsteps of the sages of Naimisharanya and accept Sri Sutta Goswami or his bona fide representative as the captain of the ship. The ship is the message of Lord Shri Krishna in the shape of Bhagavad Gita or the Srimad Bhagavatam. Tvam na sandisho datra dushtaram nititirshitam kalim sattva haram pumsam karnadara ivarnavam. We think that we have met your goodness by the will of providence, just so that we may accept you as the captain of the ship for those who desire to cross the difficult ocean of Kali, which deteriorates all the good qualities of a human being. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Tiramane Namaste Saraswatam Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paskatyade Satarane. As mentioned previously in this chapter, Prayena Yapusha Sabda Kalavasmi Yuge Jana Manda Sumanda Matayo Manda Bhaga Upadrutaha. Prayena Yapusha Shabda Kalavasmi Yuge Jana Manda Sumanda Matayo Manda Bhaga Upadrutaha. So in this age of Kali, people have but short lives. Prayena means almost, always. Prayena alpa, little. Ayusha, lifespan. We may imagine that we're living for a long time, we have plenty of time, but that's not the way the sages of Naimisharanya saw it in Dwapara Yuga, where people live for 1,000 years, and we live 80, 90, at most 100 years. And in the age of Treta Yuga, people thought people lived those in Dwapara Yuga lived in a very short period of time, because then they lived for 10,000 years. And in Satya Yuga, they lived for 100,000 years. And we're living maybe 90 years. 90 years means that in Satya Yuga you were still practically were not eligible to go to Gurukul. You were too young. Prayena Yapusha Sabda Kalavasmin Yuge Jana. So in the age of Kali, people have but short lives, and they're manda, they're lazy. Our biggest attachment usually is to our bed in the morning. If we can break that attachment, then we can go to Mangalarti. and manda, sumanda. And if one is not lazy, then generally sumanda is misguided. Yes, that's misguided. Those who are actually looking for knowledge, generally speaking, they're misguided. Anda yatandera upagiyamanaste pisha tantra urudami vara. So why is that? Because Nitevidu swartikatim hi Vishnu. That people are not usually interested in Krishna. Because why should we be interested in Krishna? Even we're devotees for so many decades sometimes, we're not that interested in Krishna. When it comes time to class, we have to drag ourselves there, and we pray, he can tell a story. So keep me awake. I said, not that I care if I go to sleep. I'd like to go to sleep, but it's embarrassing. Someone may see him asleep and they may think, well, I thought he was the great devotee. Maybe he's in trance. No, he couldn't be asleep. That's not possible. He has a taste for the holy name and for hearing Srimad Bhagavatam. Surely. So, we're lazy, misguided, because we're not actually so much interested in Krishna, because we don't know Krishna. Or we may not know Krishna that well. Sometimes Krishna is very merciful to us. Sometimes he reveals himself and we're in ecstasy and we think we're a Mahabhagavat. Everyone should touch my feet if they want to become purified, or else they're going. Yamaraj is writing down in his book the offenses against the Mahabhagavat. Because Krishna doesn't reveal himself so cheaply. One has to come to the platform of, practically speaking, asakti or bhava. One has to be in ecstasy all the time to be qualified to actually experience what Krishna is actually like, rather than what we think he's like. Of course, even in the neophyte platform, on the stage of, we can experience some bhava, we can experience some ecstasy, which is necessary if we want to understand Krishna better. But if we understand Krishna better, doesn't mean we understand Krishna. It just means we're a little less in ignorance. But that's very good. That will keep us enlivened and progressive. As Prabhupada says that there are different stages of devotional service in the Krishna book. He says that those who are neophytes, a neophyte doesn't mean something ordinary. You know, oh, you're a neophyte. Prabhu, oh, don't touch me. I'll get contaminated. Neophyte. Kanista. Oh, boy, he's a kanista. My God, I'm a kanista. I don't deserve to be in the temple room. I'm a kanista. Don't touch my shadow. No, Kanishta goes from Gajendra, who's in distress, to Dhruva Maharaj, who was interested in his great-grandfather, property greater than his great-grandfather, Lord Brahma, to the sages of Naimisharanya, who we're hearing about now, to the four Kumaras. They were also Kanishta Adhikaris. At least before they went to Vaikuntha and met Lord Narayan, they were considered Kanishta Adhikaris. So if someone said, oh, you're Prabhu, you're on the same level as the four Kumaras. Ooh. Really? I think you're overestimating me a little. No, you're just Kanishta, four Kumaras. Ooh. Okay, well maybe you're not that, maybe you're just on the level of the sages of Naimisharanya. Maybe some crocodile bit your foot and you're crying out for Vishnu. No, we have to, because we have to read Prabhupada's books, understand things properly. Otherwise we live in our imaginations rather than in the reality, and we're going to live in our imaginations and not quite in the reality unless we see things through the eyes of Scripture. Now there are different types of devotees, and not all devotees see everything through the eyes of Scripture. Not every devotee, even seeing things through the eyes of Scripture, actually experiences what's in the Scripture. But as bona fide neophytes, and even if we think, well, I've been around for so many decades, how can I be a neophyte? Prabhupada said if you chant 16 rounds, by the end of your life, you'll go back to Godhead, and you follow the four principles. And it would help if you chanted the rounds without offense also. It might be a little bit, but... How can I be a neophyte? Well, a neophyte, if one is not a neophyte, then one is on Bhava Bhakti, because neophyte goes all the way past Madhyama Adhikari, of which the lower Kanistha Adhikari is in distress, identifies themselves with their body. Anyone here identify themselves with their body sometimes? In rare occasions? Maybe at night when you're asleep. Somebody other than our spiritual being. And it goes to the Madhyama Adhikari, who has knowledge, some knowledge, or at least acting on the platform of knowledge, like the sages of Naimisharanya or the four Kumaras. Either they're inquisitive or they're on Brahman realization. That's Nishta. And then from there, actual devotional service begins at the stage of Ruchi. How many of us, when we say Hare Krishna, we just can't imagine the pleasure we're experiencing? We couldn't believe that. I'm experiencing more pleasure now than I did 5 seconds ago when I chanted Hare Krishna. That's called Ruchi. The taste is always increasing. And it's time to chant my rounds. We don't look at, oh my God, I got so many rounds, I can't believe it. It's going to be a tough day, boy. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, please, all the energy, Lord, help me get through my rounds. That's not quite on the level of Ruchi yet. How many of us, when we chant Hare Krishna, some thought goes through our mind and we go, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. How many go, wow, ooh, wow, ooh. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Ooh.
It's more like this.
So we have to recognize the level we're on. Then there's a Sakti, the mind never deviates from Krishna. That even for a moment, because the taste is so high, the happiness is so high, because it is Sakti, one is beginning to remember the pastimes of Krishna incessantly. They just flow, what's called rasasaki. They just flow through the mind, one after another. And even externally, one can see that this material world is one of Krishna's pastimes. Whether we take part in it, if we're engaged in the Sankirtan movement, or if we're just part of the material energy, we're just watching the material modes of material nature carry us away, usually into the lower species of life. And at the stage of bhava, one is always in ecstasy. The transcendental potency of Krishna is flowing through all the limbs, like Narada Muni, when he saw the super soul within his heart. Every part of his body became separately enlivened in transcendental bliss and ecstasy. And he couldn't see Krishna as being different from himself. He was so much absorbed in Krishna consciousness. And bhava is one ray in the sunlight of prema. And we think, oh yes, I know Krishna. I've read Bhagavad Gita. Oh, Bhagavad Gita, ooh, neophyte. Oh God, I don't even touch the Bhagavad Gita anymore. Ujjavala Nilamani. Oh yeah, okay. Might be something interesting to find out, something new. Therefore, the vision that we have has to be modified so that we work at least on the Madhyama Adhikari platform towards liberation. And what is that liberation? That I'm something other than Krishna's servant, and therefore I should dedicate myself completely to Krishna's service. For Krishna there's prema, and for the devotees there is cooperation. Cooperation means that I cooperate with the higher devotees, I follow their instructions, and I work together with those on the same level to follow the directions of the higher devotees, not to compete with each other who has the best idea. And for those who are on the lower level, they take help from those on the higher level, and those on the higher level, they take help from those on the higher level to help those on the lower level. So that's the level we're supposed to be working on. And for the innocent, we don't think, oh, they're innocent, I don't, they're all demons or whatever, I don't want, they can't be helped, they're beyond my help, therefore they're useless. No one has to have some kripa, has to have some feeling, at least appreciate those who have some feeling, and try to work to help innocent people become Krishna conscious, including ourselves. Hopefully we're somewhat innocent. We should help each other too become Krishna conscious. That's why we have a class, to help each other and to help the speaker. It's like if you're going out and distributing a book, and everyone you meet, you say, excuse me, and you stop them and they go, here's a book. And they go, books? I don't read books. I don't read books. And everyone you meet doesn't read a book. And then after a while you think, what am I out here for? I'm just wasting my time. No one reads books here. Book, what's a book? Has pages in it and has, I don't read. So it's like giving a class, giving transcendental knowledge, and everyone's going, and then the speaker thinks, well, everyone's asleep, I'm tired too. Set my alarm for half an hour. I can wake everyone up for prasadam. Prabhu, attention, yes, what? It's time for prasadam chai. Great class, Prabhu. I feel refreshed after your class. Therefore, one has to develop some kind of transcendental vision so that we can help the innocent. And, there's nectar in this Time magazine. I'm sure there's a lot of nectar. I can't find it, but it's here somewhere. In the newspapers, the news, did you hear about so-and-so, the war? Wow, the war. Kurukshetra, no, I'm not interested in that war. Mahabharata, no. Ukraine, wow, what's going on there? I'm enlivened. The news. One has to work on but one should not think, I'm working on the Madhyama Adhikari platform, I'm a great preacher, therefore I'm liberating so many people. No, we have to liberate ourselves before we can liberate so many people. What we're just trying to do is act as an instrument for Krishna and for his representatives, if we're actually taking shelter of the captain of the ship, then we can actually help ourselves and help others. So this is a very deep subject matter. Who's actually the captain of the ship? Now, when I first joined the movement, it was clear, because I don't have so much time, so we get to the point, that Prabhupada was the captain of the ship because no one even knew where the ship was. They didn't know where it was going, they didn't know what the ship was, so Prabhupada looked like a captain, so he must be the captain of the ship. And therefore all the conversations, Prabhupada said this, Prabhupada said that, and half the time Prabhupada actually said it. And Prabhupada wasn't saying so much. If you listen to the early tapes, Prabhupada wasn't really saying so much. Basically, he was saying that we're not this body. And Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and we should serve Him. Mostly he gave classes from the Bhagavad Gita at the beginning, and rarely he gave classes from the Chaitanya Charitamrita, and sometimes from Srimad Bhagavatam. But then after some time, Prabhupada said, and Prabhupada would hear what he supposedly said, and he said, whoever said that in my name is a rascal. Then we got so many other leaders, and they didn't necessarily understand Prabhupada very well. And therefore, they went into different realms of their own personal experience, their own personal conceptions, and things became confusing. I don't have time to go into the whole history. I remember, but I'll just tell one story. It was in New Vrindavan in 1970, I think it was 70, in 1970. They had a festival there. I guess it was Janmashtami. And at that time, Prabhupada had made in Los Angeles 4 new sannyasis. There was Brahmananda Maharaj, Gargamuni Maharaj, Vishnujan Maharaj, and Subal Maharaj. And they came there, and then Vishnujan Maharaj was like the hero, because everyone needs a hero. His voice was like a Gandharva, and he would go out in Harinam all day long, or even night long, and lead the Harinam in Los Angeles. So he was like a legend within ISKCON. And all 50 devotees in the movement were worshiping him. So he was... I was living in Buffalo, New York, which was like on the other side of America. All we heard is about his glories. And therefore, when he came to New Vrindavan for that Janmashtami, and so many, all practically half the movement on the East Coast came there, all 25 devotees, so it was Maha gathering. And they gave their classes and declared, because they had been given sannyas, and I won't go into the stories about why they were giving sannyas. I didn't find out about them until decades later. And yes, they were giving sannyas, and now they had become Om Narayan Namaha, had become as good as God, Narayan. And the first class they gave, I was sitting there, and one of them stood up. Names are not given to protect the guilty. And he said, Prabhupada left the movement, because Prabhupada had left, gone to Japan. He said he left the movement, so everyone was like shocked. He left the movement? Prabhupada left the movement. He said, because we didn't recognize that he was God. And I thought, wow, this is crazy. I mean, I read Bhagavad Gita as soon as I got it, and Prabhupada was God. This is something completely new. And one devotee stood up and said, but Prabhupada never said he was God. And one of the devotees said, sit down! And the devotees were really confused. In any case, my temple president got me out of there as soon as possible. It wasn't the most pleasant thing. Later on, I mean, I had association with these particular devotees because later on they were asked to leave the movement. Probably didn't appreciate their philosophy. And they were sent to Detroit. And then they hitchhiked down to Miami, Florida, where I joined them because Prabhupada asked me to open a temple. So I opened a temple. I was going to open the temple in Coconut Grove, Florida. And I met them down there. And I was with them for one day. We lived in a esoteric bookstore. And I had my one meal. I had my one glass of milk for the next month or so. Little did I know what I was getting into. Anyhow, Krishna arranged it. Anyhow, then I later on joined Vishnujan Maharaj, and they were very repentant, because they realized they had made a mistake. In any case, they weren't the last devotees to make mistakes. Because neophyte devotees, their tendency is that they're an illusion. They're in a walking illusion. And the biggest illusion they have is that they don't think they're an illusion. They think everyone else is an illusion. I remember one time I was sitting there with Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada, and Prabhupada looked at me and said, "Don't try and teach your God brothers lessons." So I said, "Well, that's my whole service. What am I going to do then?" So the point is that we have to recognize that we're an illusion, otherwise we're completely overcome by illusion. And our only hope is the instructions coming through our disciple succession, and not just ordinary instructions, but actually those who are bona fide instructions coming through the disciple succession. They can come directly through the books, Guru, or from Shastra, or from Guru, Srila Prabhupada, or from Sadhu, Prabhupada's representatives. They can also come through that. It's not that only Prabhupada spoke the reality. Anyone who's repeating that reality is also representing the disciple succession, but according to their level of understanding. But one should understand how Prabhupada was actually, his words were not ordinary words. They carried just as Krishna is non-different from his name, so Prabhupada's instructions were non-different from Krishna, from the reality, what was being instructed. We may not realize that. As a matter of fact, we don't realize that. Or we only may realize that to only some degree. But one should have faith in the words of the previous acharyas coming down in disciple succession. Otherwise, there is no possibility of making any real advancement in Krishna consciousness. So that instruction comes down. As Prabhupada once wrote to me, he said, "We're all servants of Krishna working in consecutive disciple succession. So please study all the books that I've written, and sometimes afterwards you'll have to help carry on the disciple succession." So does that mean that if I'm repeating the words of Krishna, I agree, through disciple succession, does that mean that my words are as good as Krishna? Well, if they are, I haven't realized it, usually. But they are as good as Krishna because they're repeating the words of Krishna, and Krishna is non-different. If I chant Hare Krishna, Krishna is there. Srimati Radharani is there. I may not realize it, but they're there anyhow, in spite of me. Similarly, if anyone else chants Hare Krishna, Krishna is there even if we don't realize it, even if they don't realize it. But when Prabhupada chants Hare Krishna, then he realizes it. Because Krishna is in his heart, his name, form, quality, and pastimes are there. And he's realizing it. So there's a difference between a Mahabhagavat giving instructions and an ordinary devotee giving instructions, although they may be the same instructions and we can benefit from both. But if one thinks that I can give independent instructions outside of what Prabhupada and our acharyas and disciple succession, or those who are connecting us with Prabhupada and our acharyas and disciple succession are giving, then I'm an illusion. Then the potency of my words will not be realized either by myself nor by anyone else, because they're not backed by transcendental experience, by reality. Therefore, one should not consider Prabhupada acharyamam vijaniyam nama martiya karichet, an ordinary person. Now, why in our movement we have our Guru Puj, everyone chants Jai Prabhupada, even during the kirtan. So how can I say that sometimes we think Prabhupada is an ordinary person? Well, because of our tendency to be ordinary, because we have an ordinary vision, Because we're conditioned souls. When we look around, we don't see the super soul everywhere. At least I don't. And if I did, I would get really bewildered right now. Exactly what that means to see the super soul everywhere. My God, there's so many super souls. I'm afraid to walk. I'm going to step on it. He's in everyone's heart. My God, he's so tiny. How can I don't need glasses anymore. And I can see him. So what that means, I'm not quite sure what it means to see Krishna in everyone's heart. I mean, actually, it's a super soul. And what to speak of the soul. And then in the 10,000, 1/10,000 is the size of Tibetan size, there is a super soul. So we don't see things properly, but we have to see things according to Shastra. And Shastra, our Shastra is what Prabhupada is giving us. And what Prabhupada is giving us is not something independent of Shastra. In other words, Krishna has explained everything to Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita, and Prabhupada's explanations are to help us understand what Krishna said in Bhagavad Gita. There's no difference between what Prabhupada was saying and what Krishna was saying. That's why he was a Mahabhagavat. Because he did not make any mistakes. Unfortunately, because we don't see things properly, especially in the beginning, so many of our writers of Prabhupada's biography, they didn't understand Prabhupada then, and we don't understand Prabhupada now. We only understand what, as Prabhupada said, if you want to know me, then know me through my books. Confirmed. It is not that anyone made a mistake glorifying Prabhupada, but the mistake is that they didn't know how to glorify Prabhupada. Because I joined fairly early, therefore I had a lot of association with our leaders back then, and all of them, including myself, we couldn't understand Prabhupada. Because how can you understand Prabhupada when you're in ignorance and you're trying to understand someone who's in the spiritual world? It's impossible. Therefore, they think Prabhupada was sometimes in these biographies of Prabhupada, Prabhupada was an anxiety, or Prabhupada was afraid, or Prabhupada was depressed, or Prabhupada was bewildered. For the external vision, that may be true. In the same way, when you read the Srimad Bhagavatam Krishna book, it appears that when Shalva came and he hit Krishna with a club, that Krishna dropped his saranga bow and didn't know what to do. Do we believe that Krishna dropped his saranga bow because Shalva hit him with a club and Krishna became bewildered? Do we believe when Shalva came before Krishna with the false Vasudeva, his father, and then cut off his head, that Krishna was bewildered for a moment? Do we believe it? When Krishna saw his friends enter into the mouth of Aghasura, Krishna became bewildered? No, this is part of Krishna's pastimes. Because unless Krishna acted like that, then Krishna book would not be, or Srimad Bhagavatam would not be very interesting. If Lord Varaha was fighting against Hiranyaksha, and her round one, ding, Varaha, heavyweight champion of the universe. Hiranyaksha, contender. Odds are all on Varaha. Varaha. Round one. Hiranyaksha swinging his club. Varaha takes his disc, cuts off his head. Record, 1 second, match over. Hiranyaksha's out. Srimad Bhagavatam would be a very small book. One moment knockouts throughout the whole book. Aghasura, Kamsa, Bakasura, Trinavarta, and boy, they're down, and all of them are down in record time. There's no. So Krishna has to act, quote, as an ordinary conditioned soul in order to make the pastimes more exciting. Give them a chance. Give the demon a chance. Let him show himself, Get a few blows, Similarly, Prabhupada was never an illusion. He was never depressed. He was never in the material world. If we believe what he said, that he was a Nitya Siddha, he took birth in a family of devotees, like his Guru Maharaj did, Nitya Siddha, and therefore he was simply fulfilling Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mission. He was never a conditioned soul. He was never an illusion. He was never whatever we may think he was, because of our conditioned nature. But he was always situated in transcendence. Although he acted as a perfect instrument to fulfill the mission of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and our acharyas and disciple succession, therefore he took different roles at different times as an instrument for them. And if we think otherwise, then we're just missing the point. That's all. We're missing the point that he was acting as an instrument to help bring people to Krishna consciousness. Yari Deka Tari Kaha Krishna Upadesh. And why does that happen? Because usually we take Prabhupada as an ordinary person, because that way we can become extraordinary. Just like people take Krishna as an ordinary person, so we can compete with Krishna. So we take Prabhupada as an ordinary person because we think, we'll put him in a light that's going to make him accessible to us, so we can relate to him. No, he did enough of that in his preaching, trying to help people relate to him. But that doesn't mean that we can understand him, just because he was able to get people to relate to him, to help them understand Krishna better. Then we've missed the point. He didn't become ordinary by helping people relate to him. That's part of his extraordinary ability, that he was able to attract so many different kinds of people so they could relate to him, so they could actually eventually hear his message. And if we take Prabhupada's ability, transcendental ability, to help others appreciate him as a person, as a representative of Krishna, because Prabhupada was affectionate, or he was intelligent, he was witty, he was whatever to different people. Like one time Prabhupada was sitting there in his room, and some ladies came from one society where they practiced not saying anything. Mona, silence. So they asked to see Prabhupada, so they get his darshan, so they were allowed in the room. And Prabhupada for 20 minutes sat there and didn't say anything. So the ladies walked out and said, "Wow, your spiritual master is amazing." Does that mean Prabhupada had nothing to tell them? Yes, probably had nothing to tell them. By not saying anything, he told them more than what if he said anything. Does that mean that Prabhupada didn't know what to say when they came in? He was overwhelmed by awe and reverence to these ladies because they were so silent? No, Prabhupada knew exactly what to do because he was a perfect instrument for Krishna. Therefore, when we hear about Prabhupada from others, we should understand whatever we're hearing as best we can. We should remember we should understand it through the Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra, and then we might be able to understand it better. It's not that we don't read these books, but some of them are actually may mislead us, because after all, they're written by persons who are just, by devotees, aspiring devotees, who just 10 years ago were, on the lowest, lower than the people that they're preaching to now. I remember one time I was at the university, and one of my friends, who I joined the movement with, his name was Jeffrey Hickey at that time, Jagadish. He became one of our leading devotees at one time, Jagadishpuru. So I was a student at the university, and he was also at the university, but he dropped out. We became friends in our freshman year, but he dropped out after the freshman year. I remember one time I was speaking with one of my professors at the university, and Jeffrey Hickey, or Jagadish, before he got initiated, came up, and he started to talk about God. He said the word God, and I said, wow, how embarrassing. He's talking about God. He didn't know what he was talking about, but anyhow, he mentioned the word God. So at that time, even if someone said the word God, it was incredible. That the background we came from, Prabhupada came to our university in 1969, and he gave a class one time. I was a devotee at that time, well, aspiring devotee. And Prabhupada sat down. I remember Prabhupada walked in, I was in Brahman realization. I was amazed at Prabhupada's presence. And then Prabhupada sat down and he started to give the lecture, and he started to talk about Krishna, God. And the whole auditorium was filled with all these students, and half of them got up and left. And I was saying, Prabhupada, maybe you should change the topic. It wasn't the most interesting topic for people, for the students at the university at that time. But Prabhupada kept on. I'm sure he cared, but he wasn't going to change the subject matter, talking about some other things. So similarly, our interests, those who joined the Hare Krishna movement, most of us weren't brought up in a Brahminical family. From the beginning of our lives, we heard about God. And therefore, after 10 years or so, after Prabhupada disappeared, it's not that suddenly everyone was God realized. I remember one of my friends who became one of the original initiating spiritual masters. He was my GBC also. We were talking one day, he said, isn't it amazing? Prabhupada made us initiating gurus, acharyas, and now we have all mystic power. I said, you have all mystic power? Well, he was a very nice devotee, actually, although sometimes but he was a very good manager and had so much responsibility. I don't think he ever read Prabhupada's books, or very often he read them. He wasn't exactly a scholar. But that was his conception. And everyone else who was also, the other initiating gurus, they all had the same conception, more or less. Misconception. I wasn't quite sure. I was thinking, my God, this is a little strange, but I didn't want to rock the boat. Because, we had heard that, Prabhupada's godbrothers were envious of him, and, we shouldn't be envious. And there were no letters. The only letters we got were the letters that were passed around. There was no information for Prabhupada's last years when he was here, especially the last year. There were no tapes circulating that were circulated. We had no idea what would happen. And therefore we had to accept it. There was no other information. I didn't quite accept that they were, my godbrother, who I knew quite well, had to suddenly become as good as God, But anyhow, I wasn't about to. It took me another year before I started getting a little bit more feisty about it. But that's where we're at. And therefore, when we hear the original biographies, we can understand that devotees didn't quite understand Prabhupada quite that well, although they did the best they could under the circumstances, and more or less they were trying to promote themselves as the Prabhupada left, don't worry, we're here, we've taken his place. There was even, we used to have Guru Puja when we went to Mayapur, and there was 11 Vyasa sons. And there was a song we were taught. I didn't memorize it, by the way. Anyhow, the song was about glorifying how when the 11 acharyas are present, then Prabhupada is also present. As if we had to wait once a year in Mayapur for Prabhupada to come. And yeah, that wasn't good for us, and it wasn't good for them. And therefore Krishna arranged it so that we got some experience. And we're also going through experience now. We shouldn't lament, oh, things are bad, the sky is falling, the material sky is falling on us, Kali Yuga's engulfing us, everything's bad, we're all bad, you're a Maya, you're a demon, we're all demons, so let us all cry together. No, it's actually experience, a learning experience. But we should learn from the pure devotee and try to understand also from his representatives how we can understand the pure devotee better. Not to learn how from the representatives apart from understanding Prabhupada better. They're here to help us understand Prabhupada better, and we understand Prabhupada better, then we'll understand our disciple succession, and we'll understand everyone else better. Because Prabhupada loved everyone. He loved his disciples. He loved his followers. He taught us how to love them also. And if we learn to understand Prabhupada and love him, then we'll love everyone better. And if we don't, then we'll also have our own ideas and we'll fight with each other. That my idea is your idea is, and therefore people won't be able to say anything. In fear, if I tell you what I think, we're going to get into a fight. Where the jiva come from, whether there should be women Diksha gurus. What? Okay. Step outside, we'll decide it there, Prabhu. Who's Prabhupada, whatever. Unless we agree that we don't understand things properly and therefore humbly discuss things. Try to understand how Prabhupada saw things to the best of our ability, or what we have to do to understand Prabhupada better. How we have to become more enthusiastic in following Prabhupada's instructions, understanding them better. Because it's not just knowledge, it's perspective, it's conviction, it's skill, and it's character. So, unless we understand those things, or if we get together and we try to understand things in that way, then we'll be able to get along with each other. We'll be able to cooperate with each other. We'll be able to have one movement based upon the actual instructions coming through the pure representative of Krishna. And through his other representatives too, who are trying to give us their own experience, their own knowledge, how we can understand the pure representative of Krishna. So I'll stop there, thank you. Hope it wasn't too controversial. Any questions or comments? Yes.
Thank you, Shri Maharaj. Thank you very much. So if I understand correctly, the best way to understand Srila Prabhupada is through his books. Do you recommend to listen to his memories from different devotees that had their interaction? Any comment on that?
Well, I think the books are the basis of what we heard. And when we hear everything about Prabhupada, we should appreciate it through the books. It's not that you were with Prabhupada, oh, poor soul. You had this experience with Prabhupada, oh, you're in Maya. No, it gives us a glimpse about what it's like for a conditioned soul to associate with a pure devotee. What glorious experiences they have, what glorious understandings they got from it. But they should be in relationship to reality, to what Krishna says ultimately, and what Prabhupada is trying to explain to us. Because that's Prabhupada's explaining reality to us, as Krishna explained it to Arjuna. And when we hear from the devotees who heard from Prabhupada, they're explaining the reality that they realized from hearing from Prabhupada, or associating with him, or serving him. So that's very good, because we're not on such a high level. We can think, oh, this poor devotee. No, actually, it's glorious what they're experiencing about Prabhupada. It's part of Prabhupada's pastimes. But we should understand it's not all of Prabhupada. It's not the whole realization. It's just a partial, but it's a glorious realization. And it's something we're going through too. And we should appreciate it. Otherwise, without appreciating Prabhupada without appreciating Prabhupada's followers and how Prabhupada was affecting them, and enlightening them, and enlivening them, then how can we appreciate Prabhupada? What's that?
I took it as a partial understanding.
Yeah, sure. Well, for us, we don't know whether it's partial or whatever it is, but we're only going to understand partially anyhow. Even if I describe to you my experience with Prabhupada, but I know they were only partial for myself. I don't know. I have no idea where Prabhupada was actually situated. You'd have to be on that level to experience it. Although I keep on remembering my experience with Prabhupada because it's enlivening and it's enlightening. But I don't think every time I feel a little ecstasy or enlightenment that's the reality. It's the complete reality. It's certainly closer to reality, but it's not the complete reality. Anything else? Yes.
Who is the captain of the ship now, at present?
You can give him the microphone.
Who is the captain of the ship at present?
Depends which ship you're talking about.
The same you mentioned in the class.
Well, hopefully we make Prabhupada the captain of our ship, but we shouldn't think, oh, Prabhupada's the captain of my ship and everyone else is, they're overboard. No, on the ship there are commanders, there are lieutenants, there are so many sailors. So on the ship there are so many people sailing on the ship. But unless Prabhupada's the captain of our ship, and even if someone else comes to the level of Prabhupada, then he's going to acknowledge that he's on that level of Prabhupada because of Prabhupada's mercy, because of the mercy of the disciple succession. Prabhupada never claimed that he was the only captain. Our whole disciple succession is with Prabhupada in his heart. That's why he's the captain. And anyone else who puts Prabhupada in the whole disciple succession and becomes self-realized because of that, realizes Krishna appears before him, they can also be considered one of the captains of the ship. Yes?
No, why I'm asking this, because we have on one side we have the Ritviks who, it's just Prabhupada and nothing else, and back to Prabhupada, magazine, and that kind of mood, and then from other side we have this people, as you say, as you mentioned in the class, those who just belittle Prabhupada or forget Prabhupada or put Prabhupada in the bin. So how to make this balance and to really become a genuine Prabhupada follower?
Hear Prabhupada's instructions through the bona fide representatives. Try to see them in perspective by assimilating the instructions. Try to work according to them so we get experience and conviction that knowledge of philosophy is something we'll argue about, conviction is something we'll die for. And then if we get conviction, then we have to develop skill in our loving relationships with Krishna and his devotees. Then we can develop the character gradually of a pure devotee. And then we'll understand who Prabhupada and everyone else is. So, it's not, how can it only be Prabhupada? Why did Prabhupada bother trying to create a movement if it was only Prabhupada? But if we think we have a movement without Prabhupada, that Prabhupada left and there's no more Prabhupada, then what does it mean that, why are we worshiping the deities? Krishna left 5,000 years ago. We have some statues we're worshiping. Just so wherever Krishna is, we can make him feel good. No, Krishna we are worshiping. Krishna is still here. He's everywhere. So Prabhupada is also here as much as we want him to be here. He's here for us as much as we want him to be. So he has to be something extraordinary. Otherwise, how could he do it? On the other hand, if we think, only Prabhupada, then that doesn't make any sense. Prabhupada created the movement. On the other hand, we think Prabhupada was just an ordinary person, and now he's handed over the reins to someone else, that you need a living guru. as if all the other acharyas are dead. They're not here anymore. They're only here in the picture. That, like people they have a picture of their grandfather, and they go once a year to the cemetery and put some flowers on his grave. So we think our acharyas are like that. They're dead and gone. So that means we're in materialists. It's a material mentality. They don't understand transcendence. Therefore, they'll never understand there's no difference between Krishna and his name. Krishna left 5,000 years ago. And where did he leave? Krishna Swadharma Upagate, Dharma Jnana Dibisa. He left the Bhagavatam, and this Bhagavatam doesn't make any sense. It's about, people with 4 heads traveling, on a peacock feather. Who could believe it? So if we have that understanding, that attitude, then of course we'll think everything's mundane. So either we'll become impersonalists by thinking only Prabhupada, or we'll become materialists by thinking, no, not Prabhupada at all. Everything's material. Anything else? Yes.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Question is, will our preaching be effective if we don't have too much idealization, but we're trying to repeat the words?
Not so effective. Not as effective as we think it is. Therefore, we like to count books, see how I'm a Mahabhagavat. I'm a Maharati. We like to count things, which is necessary, which is good. It's enlivening. You hear about that, and it's also it shows how much we're determined in some level to serve. But we shouldn't be think, see what a great service I'm doing. No, we're by the mercy of our acharyas in disciple succession, we can do something. We should get up in the morning and offer obeisances to our acharyas, to our gurus, thanking them, I got up today. That I know where my bead bag is. I still have enough intelligence at least to know where it is. So we should feel some gratefulness. We're an instrument, not try and take so much credit. See how great I am. See how much I'm doing. Everyone look. That's why we're in the material world. We'd walk around in a spotlight so everyone could see us. No, we should be humble and understand whatever I can do is all by the grace of our acharyas and disciple succession, and by the grace of their representatives too. They're also helping me. Otherwise I'm lost in my material conceptions and my past karma. Anything else? Kvala Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Gaur Premanande.